holding my two children's hands, I returned home after becoming the heiress to a multi-billion-dollar fortune, only to find my husband standing there with his mistress, holding divorce papers. But one sentence from me reduced their world, their pride, and all their dreams to ashes in a single moment. My husband held the divorce papers out toward me and said, "Sign them. Sloan and I will take care of this house and the children. You were never capable of giving them the life they deserve anyway." My name is Mistress Holloway. I am 39 years old, and that evening I was standing outside our house on Upper Mountain Avenue in Montclair, New Jersey, holding both of my children's hands. My 9-year-old daughter, Tinsley, was holding my left hand, while my 6-year-old son, Beckett, was hiding behind my coat. Inside my pocket was a letter from an attorney stating that I had inherited $1.84 billion. Standing in front of me was my husband, Callum Holloway, beside his mistress, Sloan Merrick. Sloan was wearing a red wool coat, and in her hand was the same champagne glass that had been part of my wedding anniversary set. The porch smelled of wet wood. Rainwater was dripping from the roof every 4 seconds. My teeth were clenched so tightly that I could feel my pulse beating inside my jaw. Sloan smiled. "Take whatever you need tonight. We'll have the rest of your things packed." Tinsley looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, did we do something wrong?" I could not fall apart in front of her. I looked at Callum and said only one sentence. "You really chose the most expensive day of your life to hand me divorce papers." Before I tell you what happened next, pause for just a moment and like and subscribe, but only if this story is truly touching your heart. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I read every comment. Now let me take you back 11 years, to the morning when I first began making my entire life smaller for Callum. I was a forensic accountant in Boston. My job was to uncover fraud hidden inside corporate financial records. I could read bank statements until 2:13 in the morning and identify a fake payment buried inside 300 pages, but I could not see the deception happening inside my own marriage. Callum was a commercial property broker. We met at a fundraising dinner. He told me my intelligence impressed him. 2 years after our wedding, he began mocking that same intelligence. "You're only good with numbers, not people," he would say in front of his friends. After Tinsley was born, I contributed most of my salary toward our household expenses for 96 consecutive months. The mortgage payment was $8,460 per month. Callum told people that he had bought the house. The truth was that the $310,000 down payment had come from my grandmother, Euphemia Vercourt. My grandmother Euphemia was the only person who truly saw me instead of merely hearing me. She was 78 years old, always wore her white hair tied at the back of her neck, and her home smelled of cedarwood, lavender, and old books. After Beckett was born, I developed a serious infection and spent 6 days in the hospital. Callum visited only twice. The second time he stayed for 17 minutes before saying he had an important meeting. That same night, Grandma Euphemia drove 147 miles to sit beside me. She straightened my blanket and said, "A man who lets go of your hand during difficult times has no right to hold it during the good ones." I laughed off her words. On Tinsley's 7th birthday, I organized a backyard party for 23 children. I spent 4 hours baking cupcakes, hanging paper flowers, and cleaning the chairs myself. Callum arrived 1 hour and 42 minutes late. Sloan was with him. He introduced her as his new business consultant. Sloan was wearing the same perfume I later began smelling on Callum's shirts. It was sweet like vanilla with a sharp trace of black pepper. While we were cutting the cake, Callum leaned close to my ear and said, "Stop trying so hard. No matter what you do, you'll never have the kind of appeal Sloan has." I was holding the cake knife. Blue icing covered my fingers. I did not tell anyone what he had said. I stayed quiet because I did not want to give my children a broken home. Callum took my silence as permission. First, he withdrew $18,500 from our joint account. Then $42,700. Then, without my approval, he transferred $90,000 into a company called Merrick Urban Ventures. When I questioned him, he laughed. "Why do you audit everything? I'm your husband, not one of your clients." I said, "That was our children's savings." He slammed his hand against the table. The coffee mug shook and bitter coffee spilled across my papers. "You're never going to leave, Maris. You don't fight. That's the best thing about you." That sentence became lodged somewhere inside me. Then on March 14th at 6:14 in the morning, Grandma Euphemia died. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Verena Ashcombe, called me. I sat down on the kitchen floor. The cold tiles pressed against the backs of my legs, and I held the phone so tightly against my ear that my skin began to hurt. Callum came downstairs, looked at me and said, "I have an 8 o'clock meeting. Make sure you take the kids to school." He did not even ask who had died. 12 days after my grandmother's funeral, I received a call from a Manhattan attorney named Mr. Octavian Rook. He was 71 years old and his voice sounded heavy like an old wooden door. He said, "Mrs. Holloway, your grandmother kept the details of her estate private during her lifetime. You need to come to my office." I arrived at his office at 2:47 in the afternoon. A coffee mug sat in front of him and went cold during our 53-minute conversation. He opened a brown folder and handed me a 16-page document. Grandma Euphemia had not simply been a retired school librarian as Callum believed. In 1978, she and her brother had purchased industrial land. Years later, data centers, warehouses, and medical complexes were built on those properties. The current value of her trust was $1.84 billion. It included 17 commercial buildings, 4,800 acres of land, 3 investment funds, and the Montclair house that Callum believed belonged to him. I asked Mr. Rook, "Does all of this really belong to me?" He slid my grandmother's letter across the desk. It said, "Maris, I did not choose you simply because you are my granddaughter. I chose you because even when you had power, you never used it to crush anyone. Now I have one request. Do not allow your gentleness to become your chain." My eyes remained on the letter, but the words began to blur. My first feeling was not happiness. My first thought was, what will Callum do when he finds out? Mr. Rook seemed to read the fear on my face. He said, "Your grandmother placed the house, the trust, and all major assets outside marital ownership. But we need to act quickly. Your husband has attempted to borrow $613,200 in your name during the past 18 months. The paper trembled in my hand. I was a forensic accountant. Gathering evidence was my profession. For the next 9 days I told Callum nothing. I continued making breakfast as usual, taking the children to school and warming his dinner in the evening. But at night I gathered bank records, emails, forged signatures, and every payment connected to Merrick Urban Ventures. A total of $227,400 had been transferred to Sloan. Callum had copied my signature 11 times. In one email he had written to Sloan, "After the divorce the house will belong to us. Maris will never go to court. She's so weak she'll sign the papers without even reading them." I read that email 3 times. Then I printed it and placed it inside the folder. Pause for a moment. Before I continue, tell me, has your own family ever made you feel so small that they believed you would never answer back? Write about it in the comments. And if you want to know what happened the next evening when Callum placed those papers in front of me, stay with me. Press the like button so I know you're still here. Callum chose Friday evening to give me the divorce papers because he had arranged a small party at the house. He had invited 31 people. Colleagues from his office, Sloane's parents, 2 neighbors and several relatives. He wanted everyone to witness that the house, the children, and the life now belonged to him and Sloane. When I arrived with the children, he was already standing on the porch. He handed me the divorce papers and then led the guests inside. He motioned for me to come in too, as though I had been invited to attend a celebration of my own humiliation. Cinnamon candles were burning in the living room. Golden light moved across the glass windows. Sloane was sitting on my sofa, telling people that she planned to make the children's rooms more modern. Callum raised his champagne glass. "Friends, some relationships end because one person moves forward while the other remains behind. Maris is a good woman, but she was never able to keep up with my pace." Some guests lowered their eyes. A few raised their glasses. Then he said, "I have offered her a reasonable amount of money. The house will remain mine, the children will mostly live with me, and she can make a fresh start." Sloane applauded. I was standing in the back row. Tinsley was holding my finger. Beckett was dragging the toe of his shoe through the carpet. Then the doorbell rang. Mr. Octavian Rook entered. Mrs. Verena Ashcombe and a court representative were with him. Callum frowned. "This is a private gathering." Mr. Rook said, "This is also a private residence, but it does not belong to you." First someone in the room coughed. Then there was complete silence. I stepped forward and placed my folder on the table. Callum attempted to laugh. "Maris, don't create a scene. I removed the first document. This house belongs to the Euphemia Vercourt Trust. I am the sole heir and trustee of that trust. You have no legal ownership of this property. Sloane's glass slipped from her hand. It shattered against the wooden floor and champagne spread across the carpet. I lifted the second document. These are the 11 applications containing my forged signature. This is the $613,200 loan you attempted to obtain in my name. The color drained from Callum's face. I opened the third document. This is the $227,400 you transferred to Sloane's company. And this is your own email where you wrote that I would never go to court because I was weak. Whispers began moving through the room. Callum's boss, Mr. Alaric Fenwick, stepped forward. Did you use company client accounts too? Callum did not answer. I looked at him. You were right. For many years I did not fight. But you assumed that meant I did not know how. The court representative handed him a notice ordering him to leave the house within 72 hours. Mr. Rook placed a copy of the financial fraud complaint in his hand. The gathering Callum had arranged to display his victory became the source of witnesses against him. 3 months later, his broker's license was suspended. His company fired him. Sloane filed a lawsuit against him for failing to return $68,000, and then she left him. He called me 14 times. In his final message he said, "We can try again for the children." I did not respond. The court granted me primary custody of the children. Callum was allowed supervised visitation and was ordered to repay $184,600. Instead of selling part of my grandmother's trust, I improved it. From an old 480-square-foot office, I started a non-profit organization for women who had become victims of financial fraud. During the first year we helped 73 women. In the backyard, Tinsley planted lavender and Beckett planted 6 small maple trees. When the first spring arrived, only 4 survived. Beckett placed his dirt-covered hands against my jeans and asked, "If a plant dries up, does that mean it was a bad plant?" I said, "No. Sometimes it was simply planted in the wrong place." That night I read my grandmother's letter again. The window was open and the smell of wet soil drifted inside. Tinsley was laughing upstairs and Beckett's toys were scattered across the floor. I was still not perfect. Some nights I felt afraid. Some mornings I wondered why I had waited so long. But new leaves were growing in the garden. The roots had never died. They had only been buried beneath so much weight that the light could no longer reach them. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I need to say this sincerely. If this story reached your heart, press the like button and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss another story. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? What was your experience? I read every comment. And there is another story linked in the description that I believe you should hear. Until the next story, take care of yourself. You deserve that.